The Roman Empire was the last of the great empires that ever existed on Earth. It replaced Alexander the Great's empire and lasted about 1,500 years. The Roman state did not arise spontaneously. Another civilization stood at the origins of the great Roman Empire. The Etruscan civilization appeared explosively somewhere at the turn of the 8th and 7th centuries BC. The Etruscans, or Tuscans, as the Romans called them. The Greeks called them Tyrrhenes. The Roman name of the Etruscans has survived in the modern name of the Italian region Tuscany. The Etruscans settled in what is now Tuscany, perhaps the most favorable area in terms of human life. Yes, the land here was not as fertile, but it had the richest ore deposits. There were numerous bays for ships, numerous forests, water resources, indeed, even excessive water resources, so that irrigation had to be practiced here. In each of their areas of settlement, the Etruscans created sacred unions of 12 cities. The number 12 was sacred to them. From the Etruscan civilization, a very rich archaeology has come down to us. A great number of different objects that were found primarily in Etruscan tombs. There were entire necropolises, cities of the dead, with hundreds of different burials. The excellent microclimate inside these tombs allowed even organic remains to survive. So there was also a find of an Etruscan war. It was made in 1823, a perfectly preserved body with a tanned face, fully armed. But there was one problem. As soon as fresh air gets in there, all objects made of organic materials immediately decompose. And so this warrior, whose description is given in the story of the discoverer of this tomb, immediately disintegrated into small pieces. The Metropolitan Collection owns a small sculpture of a warrior, a bronze statue of a warrior from the 5th century BC. The spear is intact. The shield is decorated with alternating /concentric stripes, zigzags, and a central protrusion. The breastplate is decorated with a pattern of punctures. There are tombs where entire clans were buried. Rich tombs also contained frescoes. As with many other people, it was believed that the deceased should be accompanied to the afterlife by the objects he used in this world, which ensured wealth. Despite the wealth of archaeology, which gives us much interesting information about Etruscan life, unfortunately, the Etruscan language itself remains incomprehensible, although it is easy to read. The Etruscans borrowed a version of the Western Greek alphabet, and so their inscriptions are easy to read. In all, more than 10,000 Etruscan inscriptions have survived, and it was from the Etruscans that this alphabet came to the Romans and became the Latin alphabet. The earliest mention of the Etruscans we find in the Homeric hymns, Hymn to Dionysus, which tells how this god was once captured by Tyrrhenian pirates. The origin of this people is still not clear. The first theory, defending the eastern origin of the Etruscans, goes back to Herodotus. The second theory also goes back to antiquity. Dionysius of Halicarnassus, a rhetorician of the age of Augustus, disputes Herodotus, arguing that the Etruscans were a local and most ancient people, different from all their neighbors in the Apennine Peninsula, both in language and in customs. The third theory, formulated in the 18th century, argues for the northern origin of the Etruscans. According to it, the Etruscans penetrated Italy through the Alpine passes. They all have confirmations and denials. In principle, it only matters to us informatively. After leaving piracy, they established a lucrative trade with the Phoenicians, Greeks, and Egyptians, and were active in the production of ceramics, terracotta, and metalwork. There are many small bronze statuettes in the museum collection, Bronze statuette of a young man, late 6th century BC. The nudity, short hair, and pose of this young man clearly demonstrate that he represents the Etruscan answer to the Greek sculptures of the second half of the 6th century BC. The figure originally held something, perhaps a spear or bow, in his right hand. One of the characteristic features of the Etruscan is that he wears pointed shoes, which are unknown on the corresponding Greek statues. Terracotta funerary urn, 2nd century BC. The frieze depicts a hero fighting a plow, an object quite common on Etruscan funerary urns, but whose specific meaning remains unclear. Terracotta ascas, flask, in the form of a rooster, 4th century BC. The Etruscans produced many ascas in the form of ducks, but ascas in the form of other birds are quite rare. Only one other example in the form of a rooster, almost identical to this one, is known. Without going into historical subtleties, let us consider only the achievements of this civilization, which will be useful to us in the future. As in Greece, the basis of statehood was the city polis under the leadership of the kings. The economic core of the state was the middle class of craftsmen and traders. Family ties were strong, and the Roman custom of giving all members of the family a common clan name dates back to Etruscan society. In Etruscan society, women led quite independent lives. Sometimes, even the genealogical was conducted in the female line, in contrast to the Greek practice. Traces of Etruscan civilization were partially buried underground, along with the Roman ruins. During the Renaissance, however, they were of interest. Among those who visited the Etruscan tombs were Michelangelo and Giorgio Vasari. The best Etruscan sculptures are probably those made of metal, mostly bronze. Bronze statuette of a young man carrying a pig, early 5th century BC. Statues of young men or gods carrying animals for sacrifice are common in Greek art, but relatively rare in Etruscan art. This statuette, with its exquisite depiction of anatomical details, was once the tip of a candelabra. Bronze handle, late 4th century BC. Handle in the form of a nude woman with wings, and exquisite decorations. Etruscan art is represented by much bronze metalwork. The Metropolitan Collection features a chariot from Monteleone, c. 540 BC, abundantly decorated with relief mythological scenes. Bronze chariot inlaid with ivory, Etruscan, 2nd quarter of 6th century BC, found near Monteleone di Spoleto in 1902, decorated with scenes from the life and Achilles. The chariot from Monteleone was part of a burial, containing the remains of 2 people and 2 drinking cups. The chariot is 131 centimeters high and is designed to pull 2 horses. The chariot itself is made of wood, covered with forged bronze plates and carved ivory ornaments. The bronze plates are decorated with Homeric iconography. The main panel depicts Achilles being handed in armor by his mother, Thetis. The frame and the chariot's trim are further decorated with detailed depictions of animals and mythological creatures. The chariot's decorations are also included inlaid amber and other exotic materials, but only bronze and ivory elements have survived. The wheels have 9 spokes each, rather than the classic Greek 4-spoke, Egyptian 6-spoke, or Syrian and Persian 8-spoke. Excavated chariots from Celtic burials have up to 12 spokes. Contemporary museum curators have long suspected that the original 1903 chariot reconstruction was not historically accurate. In 1989, under the direction of Italian archaeologist Adriana Emiliazzi, the Metropolitan Museum of Art began a 5-year study and restoration of the chariot. During the restoration, it was discovered that the chariot had originally been assembled incorrectly. In addition, evidence was uncovered to suggest that the chariot, previously considered of little practical use, had in fact been involved in a serious accident at some point in its history. The presentation of the restored chariot was scheduled as part of the Metropolitan Museum of Art's overhaul of the Greek and Roman galleries, which opened on April 20th, 2007. The Etruscans excelled in jewelry as well. The exquisite jewelry using the techniques of grains, where tiny balls of gold soldered into a hot surface were used to depict figures of gods and animals, was nowhere else as skillfully applied. A set of ornaments from the early 5th century BC. The group of ornaments is one of the richest and most impressive sets of Etruscan jewelry ever found. It consists of a magnificent necklace with a gold and glass pendant, a pair of earrings in the form of discs of gold and rock crystal, a gold dress clasp, fibula, decorated with a sphinx, a pair of simple gold fibula, a gold dress pin, and 5 rings. 2 rings are engraved with scarabs, rotating on a rotating bezel. 1 is decorated with relief heads of satyrs, and the other 2 are decorated with gold bezels. A pair of gold earrings from the 6th century BC. Ball-type earrings with symmetrical pommettes, decorated with single gold grains on top, flanked by a squatting hair of embossed gold. Gold earrings from the 4th, early 3rd century BC. The overall shape of these earrings resembles a bunch of grapes. Gold discs with floral motifs and lion heads, late 6th century BC. Finest work. In the center are 3 lion heads, fruits, and leaves. For a period of time, the Etruscan kings ruled Rome. The Etruscans gave the world their art of engineering, their ability to build cities and roads, arched vaults of buildings and gladiatorial fights, chariot races and burial customs, skilled metallurgists, shipbuilders, merchants, and pirates. They sailed all over the Mediterranean, absorbing the traditions of different peoples, while creating their own high and distinctive culture. It was from them that the Romans borrowed the architecture of temples with cladding, craft techniques, the practice of building cities, the secret sciences of the haruspic priests, who guessed from the liver of sacrificial animals, the flash of lightning and the stroke of thunder, and even the custom of marking the victory of generals by triumph. Young men of noble families were sent to Etruria to study, and Greek cults and myths penetrated into Rome through Etruria. Knowing all this, it becomes clearer what the greatness of the Roman Empire grew out of. 3,000 years ago, a tiny settlement on the Apennine Peninsula grew into a global empire. To the north, the mysterious civilization of the Etruscans. To the south, the Greek settlements. The founders of Rome considered themselves descendants of the Trojans, who escaped after the Trojan War. The descendants of Aeneas. According to legend, Rome was founded by 2 brothers, Romulus and Remus, to one of whom the city owes its name. And as is customary, one killed the other and became sole ruler, the first king. There were 7 of them in all. The legend of the she-wolf who raised the brothers is known. There is a version that this city was a haven for outcasts, slaves, and all kinds of rabble. It was an open city. Immigrants were granted citizenship. We know little about the early days of the city. It is known that the last kings were Etruscans, and it was from them that Rome borrowed the organization of the political system and the army, as well as gladiatorial fights, aqueducts, and even the Latin alphabet, the calendar, the sewers, the temple of Jupiter, and bridges. In 509, Rome was shaken by a sexual scandal. The king's son, Tarquinius the Proud, abused a virtuous girl, Lucretia, for which the king was banished. From then on, Rome did not allow power to be concentrated in one hand and gave power to 2 elected councils for a period of 1 year. The councils were controlled by a senate of 300 fathers, paters, patricians. These were the most ancient families of the city. The rest of the inhabitants were classed as plebeians and, even with great wealth, could not participate in government. These contradictions, which lasted for 200 years, led to the plebeian revolt. But it was not a revolution. At the holy mountain where the plebeians gathered, it was decided not to pay taxes and not to go into the army, of which the plebeians were the basis. The Senate had to make concessions. The position of People's Tribune with the right of veto was introduced. Override any decision of the consuls. Thus, a republic was born. Gradually, the plebeians were equalized with the patricians. Thus was born the phase, the Senate and the people of Rome. 390, Rome was attacked by the Gauls. The watchdogs did not smell the attack, and for this they were crucified on crosses for many years. Rome was then saved by the geese that awakened the guards on the watchtower. This led to military reform, and then the whole history of Rome is a history of conquest. But Rome did not enslave conquered territories. It made a treaty, and the defeated nations became an endless source of revenue and recruits to the army. The Roman legions would endure and defeat the most organized and conquered army halfway around the world. The Macedonian army under the leadership of Pyrrhus, a relative of Alexander the Great. Pyrrhic victories. But the most difficult opponent in the struggle for power on the Mediterranean will be Carthage. Pune, hence the name, the Punic Wars, which lasted more than 100 years. Senator Cato the Elder concluded all his speeches in the Senate with the phrase, "Carthage must be destroyed," and so it was done. The city was destroyed, the inhabitants were forced into slavery, and the land was sprinkled with salt. In 146 BC, Greece was conquered. Just as Alexander the Great had once been overwhelmed by the wealth of Babylon, so the ascetic Romans were struck by the richness and sophistication of Hellenistic culture. Greek would become the second language of the state. The Romans would adopt the concept of history, rhetoric, and philosophy. Oratory would become an integral part of high society. At that time, the entire scientific world spoke Greek. The Roman Empire embraced knowledge in the fields of astronomy, medicine, mathematics, philosophy, and architecture. Thus, Greek sculpture became part of the great Roman Empire. Marble sculpture, a Roman copy of a Greek work of the 2nd century BC, was excavated, found in Rome in 1892, was kept in a private collection until 1992, and was purchased by the Metropolitan Museum of Art in 2007. These young girls, united in a dancing pose, represent the 3 graces: Aglaia, beauty; Euphrosyne, joy; and Thalia, abundance. They bestow the most pleasant and wholesome things in nature and society: fertility and growth, beauty in art, harmonious reciprocity between people. They had venerable cults in Greece and Asia Minor. In mythology, they play an auxiliary role, decorating festivals and arranging dances. Their closest connection is with Aphrodite, to whom they serve as maids. And the goddess herself is present within the walls of the museum. Marble statue of Aphrodite from the 1st or 2nd century AD. a copy of a Greek statue from the 3rd or 2nd century BC. The shins have been restored from casts taken from a Roman copy in Florence, known as the Venus de Medici. The goddess of love is depicted as if surprised by her bathing. Originally, her arms were stretched forward to cover her breast and pubis, which both concealed and emphasized her sexuality. Statues of nude Aphrodite became widespread in the Hellenistic period. They were all inspired in one way or another by Aphrodite of Cnidus, created in the 4th century BC by the famous Greek sculptor Praxiteles. This statue, the first major Greek work depicting a nude goddess, was celebrated throughout antiquity. This work has the same gesture of modesty and is similar to another Roman copy, the so-called Venus de Medici, which since 1688 stands in the tribune of the Uffizi Gallery in Florence. And another fine basalt statue of Aphrodite, late 1st to early 2nd century AD. With Caesar's assassination comes a new world order in the empire, and the power of the Republic will be placed in the hands of the first emperor. Portrait ivory head of Emperor Augustus, c. 27 BC to AD 14. In addition to life-size statues in bronze and marble, miniature portraits of Augustus on coins, gemstones, glass medallions, and statuettes were common in various media. This head belongs to one such statuette, carved during the emperor's lifetime. Sardenec's cameo portrait of Emperor Augustus, c. AD 41 to 54. The cameo depicts Augustus as a triumphant demigod, wearing an aegis, a cloak usually associated with Jupiter and Minerva. Here he adorned with the head of the wind god, perhaps intended as a personification of the summer winds that brought the fleet from Egypt to Rome, and thus an indirect reference to Augustus's annexation of Egypt after the defeat of Mark Antony and Cleopatra in Rome, 31 BC.